I'm Dr. Jagmeet Madan. I'm the National President, Indian Dietetic Association, and I'm also the Principal Professor, Sir Vithal Das Thackeray College of Home Science, SNDT Women's University, Mumbai. I bring greetings to you from the IDA and SVT College, which is one of the very eminent institution and the first autonomous college in the state of Maharashtra, and celebrating its 25th year of autonomy. So friends, today I am going to talk to you on a very relevant topic, which I think every nutritionist should be enlightened on, and that is nutritional strategy for diabetics in COVID-19. Now, moving on to proteins. So protein intake normally, what is recommended is 1 gram per kg, ideal body weight per day. And Indians, being vegetarians, even a non-vegetarian Indian is a vegetarian because they don't consume non-veg food more than 2 times in a week. So if I just sit down and calculate your protein intake, normally, whether you're diabetic or whether you're not diabetic, I think it'll be very difficult even for a normal person to reach 0.8 to 1 gram per kg ideal body weight. So protein is a very neglected nutrient in Indian diets and it needs to be emphasized. So adequacy of protein is also very important for a diabetic diet. And another thing which is very important is that every diabetic should remember that it's not only protein which is important, good quantity is important, good quality is important, and every important meal of the day should have good amount of protein. Where is the reservation or where is the caution for a diabetic? Especially long-standing diabetic. That means you're diabetic for 10 years, 15 years, and you've not had good control. So you must check your renal function. If you have diabetic nephropathy, if you have, macroalbuminuria, that means there's loss of albumin in the urine, you need to cut down on your protein intake. So we recommend 0.7 to 0.8 grams per kg ideal body weight per day. So in any case, whenever there is a compromised renal function, we always assess where the patient is. And like I said, normally a patient would not go beyond 0.7 grams or 0.8 grams per kg per day. So you really don't need to restrict, but you need to guide the patient in terms of, what are the options to take to get good quality protein within that defined quantity. Now, for a vegetarian, what are the good quality protein sources? What are the good quality protein sources for non-vegetarian? I'll just cover. And in addition to that, we must say that for a diabetic diet, small protein-rich beverages and snacks are very, very important. So that's what I said, that if you're making a snack, which is a combination of limited amount of carbohydrate and good amount of protein, or a beverage, which is protein-based and you're adding a little bit of carb and other vitamins and minerals in it, in totality, it helps you because it blunts the hyperinsulinemic response, which is, what is hyperinsulinemia? Large loads of insulin secreted at one time, which may lead to insulin resistance. So just a word about protein quality. Remember, we need protein in defined quantity, but we need good quality protein. So if I'm looking at vegetarian diets, we are definitely emphasizing on pulses, dals. One bowl of dal gives you easily 6 grams of protein. And if you combine a pulse with a cereal, a whole grain cereal, there is a cereal pulse combination which complements the essential amino acids which are missing in dals and in cereals. So you have the lysine and methionine complementing each other in cereal pulse combination. So in totality, you get a good quality protein. Now, when you look at the first class proteins, I think for vegetarians, it is the milk and milk product. Among milk products, I think curds is a very good option because it's very good to digest and it favors a good microflora. Paneer, homemade paneer from low-fat milk can be recommended. So 1 glass of milk can easily give you about close to 5 to 6 grams of protein. Similarly, from non-veg protein sources, you have your chicken, lean cuts of the chicken. You have egg, which is very readily available. So 1 egg gives you close to 6.5 grams of protein. And then you have fishes. Of course, in the lockdown period, some of the availability of these food items may be limited, but something like egg can always be emphasized, and especially egg whites, maybe 2 to 3 egg whites a day. And you could probably have yolks only twice a week so that you don't overdo on something which is very high in cholesterol, considering that diabetics have a poor lipid profile. So much about proteins, and now coming to fats. Now, in diabetic diets, I don't think so we should be scared of fats. We should be giving a good amount of fat, but again, the message which needs to be taken is that this fat should be from invisible sources. So when we say invisible sources of fat, what are we looking at? We are looking at a defined type of fatty acids. That is, we are looking at fatty acids which are high in MUFA, which are high in omega-3. So let me clarify here that we are looking at defined quantity of visible fat, which is like we define it as not more than 3 teaspoons per day, for per person per day. Or we also say that it's not more than 500 ml per person per month, right? Now this visible fat which we take, it could be in the form of an oil, and which oil to pick. We would pick oils which are high in MUFA, because we really need good amount of MUFA in our diet, and high in omega-3. Now let me just make you explain that there are 2 essential fatty acids. One is omega-3, that is linolenic, and the other is omega-6, which is linoleic. So these essential, why are they called essential? Because they have to be obtained through the food, and a certain desired ratio of these 2 has to be maintained. When we look at our diets, we get plenty of omega-6, but it's the omega-3 which becomes very limiting. So that is why when we pick on an oil, we pick on an oil which is either a combination of MUFA and omega-3. You have blended oils which are available, or you have 2 oils which you use in rotation or in combination. One should be MUFA rich and the other should be omega-3 rich. So which are the oils which are high in MUFA? You have the olive oil, which has, of course, the highest amount of MUFA, but it is expensive. Plus, it is not so suitable for Indian cooking. So not necessarily that we have to use olive oil. You can use, rice bran oil. You can use groundnut oil, canola oil. They're all rich in MUFA, and they can be supported by the omega-3 rich oils like soybean oil, like mustard oil, a processed refined mustard oil, so that all the inhibitory factors are removed. So that is important, that how you pick your oil and how you use the combination. So that is where the combinations are given over here. You can have groundnut, sesame, rice bran, cottonseed, palm oil, olive oil. These are all giving you MUFA. And you have mustard oil, soybean oil. These are the ones which are giving you omega-3. Of course, sunflower, safflowers are very high in omega-6. So I think you need to really look for blends which are giving you a good combination of MUFA, omega-3 and N6. And what we really look at is a ratio of 1:1.3:1 for SFA, MUFA and MUFA. So all said and done, the bottom line is emphasize on an oil which is high in MUFA. Combine it, with an oil which is also giving you omega-3, or use a blend. But most important statement is control the quantity of oil which you use per day and per month. So per day, not more than 3 teaspoons, per month, not more than 500 ml per person. So go back and check how much of oil do you buy, how many people are there at home, and what is your oil consumption. On the other hand, like I said, we want to give a diabetic invisible fat. So which means I want to cut down on my visible fat, but I want to give a lot of healthy fats in the diet, and I want to replace the carbohydrate by these healthy fats. So where do I get these healthy fats from? I get them from nuts and oil seeds. Now oil seeds like flax seeds, they're one of the richest sources of omega-3. Then you have the chia seeds, then you have the walnuts, then you have almonds, you have pistachio. They're all nuts and oil seeds which are giving you very good amount of omega-3. And not only nuts and oil seeds, but in addition to that, you have your pulses, the variety of pulses like your black gram, your black rajma, your soya bean, a millet like bajra. They're all containing very good amount of omega-3. Then you have your fatty fishes like mackerel, salmon, tuna, of course. In these scenarios of COVID-19, the availability may be limited, but they give you the ready form of omega-3, which is your EPA and DHA, because what you consume through your nuts and oil seeds and pulses and green leafy vegetables containing omega-3 needs to be converted to the long chain derivatives of omega-3, which is the eicosapentaenoic acid and docosahexaenoic acid. But the fishes contain this in a ready form, and that's where, when in season, freshwater fishes, the fatty fishes, they can be emphasized in the diet. But the most important thing is you still need to worry about the total oil which you use to cook these fishes. So the methods of cooking should be preferably steaming, baking, so that your oil consumption is minimized. Then we move on to a very important aspect in a diabetic diet, and that is making your healthy plate. So this is a very important message which a diabetic should get, that every time you serve yourself, whether it is breakfast, whether it is your lunch, whether it is your dinner, I think you have to ask yourself this question, that in this plate, where is my fiber? So you have to look for your fiber first in your plate. And then the second question you have to ask is, where is my protein? So these are two important questions which a diabetic must ask. Where is my fiber? Where is my protein? And if you look at this plate, the emphasis which is given to fiber, which is coming from all your non-starchy vegetables, we said local, seasonal, colorful, okay, any vegetable which is seasonal, which is colored, which is non-starchy. What are the non-starchy vegetables? Anything starting from your beans, peas, cauliflower, your green leafy vegetables, anything which not roots and tubers, because they are starchy. So it's like one bowl of potato bhaji is like equivalent to one chapati. So you can't put potato on this side of the plate and say I'm having vegetables, right? So it has to be the non-starchy vegetables. Half of your plate should be filled with that. 1/4 should be filled with your good quality protein. And I just already explained what are the good quality protein sources. And only 1/4 of your plate should be your cereal. And cereal or carbohydrate, the cereal, it not necessarily that you have to have your carbohydrate only from cereal. You can have it from corn, you can have it from brown rice, you can have it from sweet potato. You can have any complex carbohydrate, but have it with fiber. That means don't have processed cereals here, refined cereals like maida based rumali roti, naan. Those are not the choices for you. You need whole grain cereals, and you still need to add more fiber to your cereal so that you get fiber and you get micronutrient. But most important thing is that look at the weightage which you have to give. So the first question, where is my fiber? What is my emphasis on fiber? Half of my plate. Where is my protein? What is the emphasis? At least 1/4 of my plate should be my good quality lean protein, and only rationed amount of 1/4 of my plate should be my carbohydrate or cereal. So the moment I get this concept, my mind will automatically start working. What should I consume for my breakfast? What should I consume for my lunch? And what should I consume for my dinner? And that is where another thing which I said, that if this half of your plate, you convert it into a salad, so you have a bowl of salad, you have a bowl of cooked vegetable, you start your meal with your salad. So you get your fiber in place. You have maybe two lean pieces of chicken. So that's your second order of cooking, of eating. And then you go on to your cereal eating. So on one side, you make your plate look like a healthy plate, wherein you emphasize on your fiber, your protein, and restrict your carbohydrate. And you also monitor your order of eating, fiber and protein first, and then carbohydrate. You will wonder that how this magic works in your body physiologically, and it will start showing results on your blood sugar control. So this much was for the macronutrients, carbohydrates, good quality protein, good quality fat. How do we get it? And how do we make our healthy plate? And what is the order of prioritizing what should I eat first in my plate? Now we go on to the micronutrients, because micronutrients are very important for diabetics. And we know why they're important, because they're involved in carbohydrate metabolism, glucose metabolism, insulin release, insulin sensitivity. And we also know that diabetics, if they are uncontrolled, it can also favor, uncontrolled hyperglycemia can favor loss of trace elements and water-soluble vitamins, and especially serum vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, magnesium are often lower in individuals with diabetes mellitus. And if you look at these micronutrients, all vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, magnesium, they are all really highlighted in maintaining or strengthening your immunity. And that is where, diabetics are becoming like more susceptible to get affected by COVID-19. So boosting immunity, building immunity is very important for diabetics. And like I said, that, with the COVID-19 and compromised immunity, it can really create a havoc in the body. So to boost the immunity, a variety of foods, the diet diversity is very, very important. And I'm going to address this, that which are the nutrients which are important for boosting our immunity, and what are the foods which can provide us with those nutrients. One more statement about immunity is that the more we emphasize on refined carbohydrates, sugar-based preparations, sugary drinks, it is known that it impacts our WBC function, our immunity function, and it tends to impact our immune response. So it is very important what is the kind of variety of food which we should incorporate in our diet to boost our immunity. And the most important things for boosting immunity are your micronutrients. And I already said, that your vitamin C is important, vitamin D is important, zinc is important, selenium is important, and especially there is a lot of evidence now to say that they help in COVID-19 state or combating the respiratory infections. So when we talk of vitamin C, I think there are a whole lot of foods in our Indian diet which are very good sources of vitamin C. One of the richest source of vitamin C is your amla. One amla can actually meet your day's vitamin C requirement. Okay. Similarly, you have vegetables like capsicum, cabbage, lettuce. So all these vegetables which can become a part of your salad are loaded with vitamin C. Something like drumstick leaves, very high in vitamin C. Something like, your fruits like guava, fruits like oranges, even, and if you're just your lemon juice, they're all containing good amount of vitamin C. So vitamin C, of course, is a very heat labile vitamin. So I think nature has been very, very good to us that, we have all the vitamin C rich sources which can be consumed raw as a salad or as just sorted vegetables. So we should consume it that way. Vitamin D, of course, we don't have very many sources. Vitamin D is there in good quantity in milk, eggs. But I think exposure to sunlight, even 10 to 15 minutes exposure from, in the mornings, 9 to 11, just your face, hands, I think that much of exposure is also good enough to maintain your vitamin D levels. But diabetics, especially, need to assess their vitamin D levels, and I think I would recommend that they should know what are their serum vitamin D levels. And if the levels are low, then vitamin D supplementation can definitely be recommended. Similarly, zinc, zinc is also there in foods like your egg, non-vegetarian foods, your nuts and oil seeds, pulses. The same holds true for selenium. So a variety of pulses, nuts and oil seeds, whole grain cereals, and even non-veg foods like egg, chicken, they all provide you good amount of zinc and selenium. Besides this, vitamin A you get from all your green leafy vegetables, your yellow and orange colored vegetables and fruits, and those are all, the carotenoids which get converted to the ready form of retinol in the body. And the ready form of retinol is there in your non-vegetarian food like egg, like milk. And of course, these days you are also getting fortified foods with vitamin A, with vitamin D, which is also a good option. Then vitamin E is also there in your nuts and oil seeds, plenty. And I think that is why using nuts and oil seeds in diabetic diets, a handful of nuts and oil seeds, a recommendation. I told you that we have used to the tune of 56 grams of almonds, and it has really helped, in bringing down the glycosylated hemoglobin. So we need to emphasize these kind of foods. Moving further, let me also bring you a concept of what we call as the nutrient density. So nutrient density is something, that you get more in less. So it's the total nutrient content per calorie or per gram of food. So that's the pack of healthy nutrient dense punch which you get. And in diabetic diets, I think that we need to emphasize on food groups which add to the nutrient density. I'm just giving you one example. It's like 15 grams of nuts and oil seeds will provide you, nutrients like vitamin E, zinc, magnesium. So, all your nuts and oil seeds are not only providing you with fiber, they're providing you with your high amount of MUFA, your vitamin E, your magnesium, zinc. So all these vital nutrients which are needed for boosting your immunity come from a handful of this group of food. So this concept of nutrient density is very, very important, and that is why when it comes to prioritizing the food groups in your plate, I think you should have good weightage given to nuts and oil seeds. But again, remember, when you're consuming nuts and oil seeds, your visible fat, the 3 teaspoon can come down to 2 teaspoons, but we don't mind giving you a little more of nuts and oil seeds. Similarly, on the other side, you consuming pulses is also a good idea. It's a good idea to cut down on your rice and have a little more of pulse, maybe 1.5 katori of dal or a pulse, and little less of roti or rice, because again, with pulses, you're getting a lot of nutrient density. You're getting proteins, you're getting soluble fiber, you're getting, calcium, iron, magnesium, you're getting a whole lot of nutrients and phytochemicals as well. Then in addition to that, you have, like I said, colored, create a rainbow, so colored vegetables and fruits. They are also nutrient dense because they're giving you a whole range of antioxidants and phytochemicals, which are very good for your internal environment, anti-inflammatory environment. Nowadays, we are talking a lot about antivirals because, they have always been a part of our kitchen, but we never realized the importance of using them in the right way, in the right quantity. And I think use of ginger, garlic, turmeric, tulsi, neem, lemongrass is being really highlighted to boost the immunity. And there is science behind the active component in each one of them. So you have the curcumin in turmeric, you have the gingerol in ginger, you have the allicin in garlic, you have the bioflavonoids in tulsi, you have the cinnamic acid and cinnamon aldehyde in cinnamon. And, the quantities are also spelt out. So 2-3 things about these antivirals, herbs and spices is that you should use them as much as possible fresh and not subject to too much of heat treatment. So that's where we say that when we take turmeric, we can add it to milk, or we can add it, along with ginger, tulsi, cardamom, and consume it in a form of a drink, or what you call as milk latte. Then, your ginger juice can be a part of your drink. You can use ginger in your chutneys, garlic in your chutneys, and garlic also, when you crush the garlic, the allicin gets activated. So you need to use it in that form. And similarly, tulsi and cinnamon can also be, tulsi can be added to your tulsi tea, tulsi water, and cinnamon can also be added to your tea or your cinnamon water. You can even sprinkle it on your salad. But the thing is that we need to use them fresh. We need to use them in defined quantity, and the matrix on which they are most compatible, those matrix should be used. And overdoing on anything which is good may also lead to side effects. So we have to be careful about that. Then the last word about your gut microflora. I think it's very, very important that today everything is, we would say it's not only what you are, what you eat, but your gut is what you eat. So what you put inside your body becomes a substrate for your gut microorganism. Gut is your gastrointestinal tract. So the kind of microflora which you favor in your gut depends on what you put inside your gut. So you have trillions of microorganisms, and many of them are beneficial microorganisms, and many of them are pathogenic microorganisms. So what kind of balance do you create within your gut flora is very important. So what you want is that more of beneficial microorganisms. And how do you get more of beneficial microorganisms? When you incorporate probiotics and prebiotics. So probiotics are foods which contain live culture of microorganisms which are known to favor good microflora within your body. So you have the lactobacillus, you have the bifidobacterium. So there's specific strains of these species, which are having probiotic effect. And for any product to be called probiotic, it should have that specific strain. So you can't say that I set curd at home. It is a fermented product. There is a culture which you've used, but you've not used a specific strain of probiotic. So you can't call it a probiotic curd. But a probiotic yogurt or curd is a standardized product which contains that specific strain in a defined strength or quantity per serving. Then only you can call that product as probiotic. But yes, fermented foods are a part of our Indian cuisine. They may be good on your stomach, easy to digest, but they are not probiotics. Prebiotics are the foods which give you a substrate. to favor the growth of the desirable microflora. So you have the raw banana, you have the raw garlic, you have the wheat bran. These are all the foods which contain oligosaccharides, which act as, resistant starch, oligosaccharides, inulin. These are all the prebiotics which favor the growth of desirable microflora and which indirectly impacts your blood sugar levels and your lipid profile. So these are all the benefits which you can accrue by improving your gut microflora. Now, last word about the recommendations for supplementation. So I would say that we still don't have adequate documented literature, to kind of emphatically recommending supplementation for diabetics in COVID-19 scenario. But yes, vitamin C has got emphasized, and the National Academy of Medicine has recommended 2000 milligrams of vitamin C per day for a good immune system. Vitamin C supplementation is being recommended for individuals with respiratory infections, or with urinary tract infections, people who are doing rigorous exercises, even for adults and children to combat the symptoms of cold and flu. Then in addition to that, another vitamin which is being emphasized for supplementation is vitamin D. But vitamin D, being a fat-soluble vitamin, I would recommend that we should know our levels, and then based on that, the supplementation should be taken. And to my mind, supplementation should always be taken under medical supervision. So a vitamin D supplement, which is the levels which are recommended for respiratory tract infection is 2000 IU to 5000 IU per day. Then the third nutrient which is being emphasized for supplementation is zinc, and especially for uncontrolled diabetes, elderly, there are levels indicated for zinc supplementation. There are also levels indicated for supplementation for adults and children. But I still feel that, these levels there should be a baseline assessment of where the patient is, especially, in critical states of illness. And then the supplementation should be done under medical supervision. I already spoke about the spices and herbs. Salt intake, yes, needs to be minimized. We already said about HFSS, high fat, salt, sugar foods. So diabetics really need to be wary about these foods. Salt intake should be, less than 5 grams of sodium chloride. So I would say 1 level teaspoon, not a heaped, but a level teaspoon, which is what we should recommend. And there should be no salt at the dining table. We have a habit of adding salt to our salads, to our preparations, in spite of the fact that our preparations already contain salt. So if we go slightly low on salt, I think it's very, very helpful, because most of the diabetics are also hypertensives, and going low on salt is going to help in a lot of ways. Similarly, other things which a diabetic must keep in mind is too much of tea consumption with sugar is not a good idea. And now I think with the advent of so much of innovation in the healthy drinks which we have a lot of options for green tea, black tea, and we can consume them more rather than the regular tea with the sugars added to it. Artificial sweeteners can be used in moderation. Please, you should know what is the acceptable daily intake of an artificial sweetener. So if we are talking about sucralose, we're talking about stevia, we should know what is the ADI, which is always calculated based on your body weight. So your nutritionist can guide you how much is it that you can consume. Then munching on this fritters and farsans is not a good idea. And like I said, for a diabetic, the best snacking options are the nuts and oil seeds, and a limited amount of fruits. in addition to that, I think even sticks of vegetables, and these are the things which one can really become innovative in terms with very interesting dips you can make, and those are the things which you can use for snacks, or something like you can make an usal or a bhel made out of pulses. So those are the innovations I think your nutritionist can help you create those kind of snacking options. And smoking, drinking, betel chewing, these are not the good habits, and these lifestyle changes would really help diabetic. And drinking is not a recommendation. So if you're not, then continue not. If you are, then I think we need to discipline ourselves in terms of decreasing the quantities. And one word of caution is that never blend your drinks with your drugs, because one can go into a bout of hypoglycemia. So these are the precautions one has to take. Just a word about meal replacement therapy. Of course, it would come in situations where we are not getting the desired results in terms of fat loss. Especially diabetics do find it very difficult to cut down on their fat percentage or weight. So and we know that 5 to 10% weight loss can really help in decreasing the comorbidity. So sometimes use of these meal replacement therapy, which could be a shake, which could be a soup, which could be a nutrition bar, which has a defined quantity of calories, protein, carbohydrates, good quality fat, vitamins and minerals. So that becomes a good option to replace your usual meals. So normally when we use these meal replacements, it is normally you would either replace a snack, because that's the time when people go wrong in terms of eating, or you could probably, lighten your later part of the intake, your dinner, by these options. But there are studies to show that if we use the meal replacement therapy with a scientifically planned diet, we do get good results in terms of improvement in body composition and improvement in metabolic parameters for individuals. Online nutrition consultation is the new normal, and I think all of us are doing online consultations. So my email IDs are also there. I'll be sharing that with you anytime you have any query, you want to consult, you can reach out, fix up an appointment. And today I think nutritionists are doing a good job through the use of either any virtual platform where you can see the person, you can interact with the person. And I think this kind of telehealth delivered dietary interventions is the way forward, where we need to connect to our patients and do a hand holding. So they need connect, they need motivation, they need guidance, and which can be done even in COVID-19 times. I think you're going to have another CME on role of telemedicine in providing medical nutrition for diabetes patients. So check out for that. Exercise is very important, and especially in COVID-19 times when we are restricted to our houses, let's remember that, the onus is on us. We can continue to sit in front of our laptops and computers or in front of the TV and watch Netflix. And that's one way of spending the day. And another way is that we can become very intelligent to take out that 1 hour from our day, or 1.5 hours from our day, and break it down into some amount of aerobic activity, at least 30 minutes a day, some amount of strengthening activity, at least 15 minutes a day, and stretching exercises like yoga. Yoga can also be used as a strengthening exercise, something like pranayam, meditation. I think these are all good inputs which we need to kind of bring into our total day. And especially in COVID-19, when we get lost in our work, I think we can set alarms and get up every half an hour, every 40 minutes, take a round, do some squats, or do these kind of things so that we improve our muscle strength and we also become more active. Physician's role is very important because you need to connect with the physician to get guidance about your sugar controls, your lipid profile control. You can be even guided based on your metabolic control, what kind of exercises you can do. You can be reinforced through connect with the videos, and you need to be given word of caution in terms of what kind of complications can happen if you don't pay attention to what kind of exercises you can do. So that's very, very important. So last, I'm going to touch on this case, which is the case with uncontrolled type 2 diabetes and complex comorbidities, whose diabetic care was managed only through diet. I know from experience that a lot of type 2 diabetics can just be controlled only through diet and lifestyle intervention. They don't even need drugs. So this is a 69-year-old man with a 5-year history of type 2 diabetes. He presented to the clinic with recent weight gain, suboptimal diabetes control, and foot pain. He started taking glyburide 2.5 milligrams every morning, but stopped taking it because of dizziness. He takes Etorvas for hypercholesterolemia. In the past, his wife had encouraged him to treat his diabetes with herbal remedies, which is most often the case. First you become your own doctor, then there are many doctors in the family who connect you to various people and say, you do this, it'll be fine, and weight loss supplements. And then he also does not test his blood glucose levels at home. So you don't want to know, okay? You feel that, not knowing is a good thing, and just close your eyes to it. So when the investigations were done, what we find is that his hemoglobin's level were less than 8%, his fasting glucose was 178, HDL was only 443, triglycerides were 177 milligrams per DL, and there was urine microalbumin already there. So, and when the diet history was taken, it revealed excessive carbohydrate intake in the form of bread, pasta, and his normal dinner consisted of 2 cups of cooked pasta with homemade sauce, 3 to 4 slices of Italian bread, and he would very often, like for a snack, take 2 breads with butter, olive oil, or if he had to eat fruits, then he would only eat fruits in the meal or just before the meal. Or after the meal. He used to drink 8 ounces of red wine, which is about 250 ml of red wine with dinner each evening, and he stopped smoking more than 10 years ago. So the assessment based on medical history records, physical examinations, lab results clearly show that he's an uncontrolled type 2 diabetes. BMI 32.4, hyperlipidemia, again controlled only through the medication. There's peripheral neuropathy, which is already set in, so he's having a foot pain. There is hypertension, and he doesn't need to seem to be checking that. There is already microalbuminuria, which has set in. And there are complete self-care management and lifestyle deficits, limited exercise, high carbohydrate intake, no self-monitoring of blood glucose, and very poor understanding of diabetes. So such a patient, when he comes to you, I think you need to put your focus on what needs to be highlighted. So like we said, the first slide, which we said that you have to look at the dietary pattern, you have to look at the physical activity, you have to look at the pharmacotherapy, and you have to look at the monitoring. So, so when it comes to dietary pattern, for sure, you would focus on weight loss, and more than weight loss, I think improved diabetes control, which can easily be achieved through, the revision of the, or just adjustments of his dietary intake. So what we find here is, if you looked at his food diary, that there is no focus in terms of the macronutrients, the micronutrients. There is no concept of healthy plate. There is no concept of the defined meals. and how within a meal you have to emphasize on your fiber, your good protein, your good quality carbohydrates, and you need to be eating at a defined time. Your carbohydrates are a rationed macronutrient, and so all these things really need to be streamlined based on his recall, based on his routine. And once we do that, along with that, I think because his medications are leading to hypoglycemia, he's not comfortable. So I think the patient was put on metformin, and the patient was motivated to buy a glucometer, so that he does check his sugars post meal, post every meal, 3 to 4 times at least for a week, sometimes midnight, so that he gets an idea that how well his sugars are controlled. So I think what needs to be highlighted here is it's not only just your fasting or postprandial which is important, but fine tuning your intake with your medication and with your levels of activity is very important, which may take a week, 10 days, 15 days. And that's where the healthcare team can really help the patient. And he was also started on anti-hypertensive medications, and the dietitian adjusted the meals, reducing the carbohydrate intake. And I just told you about the healthy plate, the meal distribution, the portion sizes. So the outcomes for this patient were the patient lost weight, and the moment you quantify your food, you have a defined portion, you have a right distribution through the day, you supported with pharmacotherapy, you do monitoring, automatically you achieve better glycemic control, and the weight loss is inevitable. And the moment you get control on yourself, I think you get a lot of strength within. And so it is a team approach which has helped this patient get better. And what is very important is also to keep the vital pathways of communication open. So it's not only a one-time effort. I think that's where I said, even in COVID-19 times, what has come as a saving grace is that through counseling, telemedicine, you can be in touch with your patients, and on day-to-day basis, you can give them tips, you can do a lot of hand holding, and a lot of dialogue can happen between them and you, because that's very crucial to take them forward. The API ICP recommendations for management of diabetes during COVID-19 include that it's not wise to initiate aggressive weight loss measures during COVID-19. Avoid restrictive diets like keto diet, intermittent, prolonged fasting. I think these are the diets which people are experimenting on their own. So I think it's a strong recommendation that diabetics should not engage in something like this on their own. No sudden change in pattern of diet or activity. We should look at the total protein intake in the diet, because sarcopenia can aggravate catabolism. A good amount of calories, protein intake, and in case of critical illness, yes, enteral feeds are recommended, and hydration is very, very important. But then in cases of cardiac, renal, or medical condition where fluids are restricted, we have to go as per the subject's condition. So the key care for diabetic person during COVID-19 is to ensure a regular schedule, a healthy and a balanced diet, checking glucose levels. That's what I said, monitoring, having sufficient stock of diabetes medicine, try and be mobile. Not just use mobile, but be mobile at home, and do a variety of exercises, whether it's aerobic, whether it is strength training, or whether it's yoga, pranayam, meditation, and keep in touch with the healthcare professionals. So do communicate, because it's only through communication that you can resolve your concerns and you can get a good direction. So thank you so much for a patient hearing.